It's that time of the year again. Premier League predictions time, here we go. Note, this is being recorded on the 10th of August, so any transfers that happen after this could completely change my table, it could change the signing of the season, and stuff like that. Just a little disclaimer. As always, I'm interested in your predictions. Let me know them in the comments down below. Let's get into it and start from bottom to top. In 20th position, I am going to go, unfortunately, for Luton Town. And I would be ecstatic to be wrong about this one because I would love them to prove myself and everybody wrong and somehow manage to stay in the Premier League, but they just shouldn't be able to, really. With the funds they have available, the facilities, everything like that, they're going to go for a more defensive, long, counter-attack style of football and hope that they can get up some points, ideally turn their home form into some good wins and pick up some surprise results, maybe a couple of draws or a win or two away from home, but it's going to be really, really hard for them. And it feels harsh, but it just seems right. 19th, we're moving up to another promoted team, and we're doing two of them in the bottom three this year. Spoilers. Sheffield United, I'm going with 19th. And when they previously came up, they had some players that just absolutely dominated throughout the season, especially in FPL. Lord Lundstrom, if you know, you know. And under Chris Wilder, they achieved some crazy things, but I just don't know if it's going to be the same this time. And the thing is, there are some really poor teams in the Premier League, but the jump up to the Prem is still a massive one. And so, whilst I have them in 19th, it also wouldn't surprise me if they end up finishing 16th or something like that. I just don't quite think that, once again, they're going to have enough to stay in the league. Now we move on to 18th place, and this is not a promoted team. I'm going to go with Wolves. Now, they are basically just in a bit of a mess right now. There's still time in the transfer window, but as it stands, they've parted ways with their manager, Lopetegui. They've brought in Gary O'Neill. Clearly, things are not going well behind the scenes because there's no way that he would have left if he had got what he was promised going into the summer, because we heard that there were crisis talks going on where he was threatening that he was going to end up having to leave if they didn't do what he was looking for, but then things seemed to calm down. But then, since that, they've lost a couple of players, big players as well. Jimenez not being as good as he has in recent years, ever since his injury, but still a loss for them. Ruben Neves is obviously a monstrous loss as well, losing some of their defence. It's just not good, and the signings the other way, what's going on? So, clearly, he had been made promises and they haven't been fulfilled yet. And so, in a bit, I'll see you later. So Gary O'Neill has got a hell of a job on his hands. And I just feel like they're in too much of a mess. And I think they're going to go down. In 17th, just surviving the drop, I'm going with West Ham. Is this a controversial one? Maybe, but they weren't good last season. I feel like them winning the Conference League really sort of made everyone sweep under the carpet the Premier League season that they had, because it really wasn't good. They were looking like they were well in the relegation race up until maybe a month before the end, where they got like 2 or 3 wins, and because of how bad everyone else was, they managed to break away a tiny bit. But things weren't looking good. They've now lost Skamaka, who their fans wanted to see more of, but nope, he's now gone. They've obviously lost Declan Rice, which is a massive just killer to that team. Paqueta is potentially going to go to Man City, which is a crazy one that's come out of nowhere. They are looking to bring in Ward-Prowse, Maguire, maybe McTominay as well. I just think they didn't seem great last year. Their team overall is going to be worse this year. That Rice loss is just monumental. Moyes is basically only still in the job because they won that final. If he'd lost that, he probably would have been sacked. So it wouldn't surprise me to see him leave at some point throughout the season. And maybe that will be where they turn around their form. January signing, stuff like that. But I think they'll just about stay up. But I don't think they're going to have a good year. 16th, I'm going Bournemouth. Now, why have I got them to stay up is really the question. And the simple answer is they've got some okay players and they are not hindered by any of these other competitions, like West Ham being in the Europa League, for example. And it's not as if they've lost the core spine of their team or anything like that. So I think they'll do okay. I think they'll just about stay up because there are some teams in this league that just aren't good. Speaking of a team that haven't been that great in the last couple of years, in 15th place, I have gone with Everton. Now, they have barely survived in the last couple of years, but maybe this is the year where they finally start to move a bit further back up the table and not be involved in the relegation scrap. Sean Dyche, we all know what he is about. We've all, though, been very intrigued to see what he could do if he has a bit of a bigger budget. And so far, Everton's signings, not incredibly exciting. Dan Juma could be a really interesting one. Are they still going to try and persist with Calvert-Lewin as the main man when he is fit and firing this season? We'll have to wait and see. But I just don't think that they are going to make a big jump up the table, but I think that they will be out of the relegation scraps this year because he's had time at the club now and can work a bit more of his magic to just get them to be a much more solid team. 14th, the last promoted team, Burnley. Now, why am I putting them up here and not potentially in that relegation dogfight? I think it's mainly due to style of play. It's exciting, it's forward-thinking, and I know that they had some loan players and stuff like that last season, which could potentially be a bit of a differential now that they've gone and they've had to bring in different players. But with company at the helm, they've got a style and system that they want to stick to. And I just think that it's going to be better than some of these other teams, like, for example, an Everton that just seem stuck in that Dyche-esque way, that you will just see them eke out a few more points over the course of a season. They will probably concede more goals than someone like Everton, but I think that will be just combined with scoring more as well, with a bit more fluidity, a bit like Leeds in some of the last few seasons, especially under Bielsa. You saw, yes, they concede a lot, but they would score a lot more, and so their goal difference is all over the place throughout the season. I think that could potentially be Burnley, and I'm really, really intrigued and excited to see how company does managing in the Prem. In 13th, I've got Fulham. Now, this could easily go a little bit higher, but there is just uncertainty right now. Marco Silva has turned down offers to go and manage in the Saudi League. They've picked up Jimenez because of the mess that is going on with Mitrovic. He's said that he isn't going to play for them again, but yet he played a little bit like in pre-season or has been involved. It's an odd one, isn't it? So if he goes, that is just a massive, massive loss. If Willian goes as well, which is looking like it might happen, he may go to Saudi even though he's just signed a new deal. That's also a big loss for them because he actually came up pretty clutch last season in a few games. So it's a tough one for Fulham because, as with all of these, it is based on what will or won't happen in the next few weeks. So I'm putting Fulham down here. We'll see what happens. In 12th, I've got Crystal Palace. Now, I was a little bit surprised in the summer to see that Roy was going to stay on there. However, at the end of the season, when he did come back, it was a completely different Hodgson team to that we have seen before. You saw the likes of Eze and Elise just looking unbelievable. Those two alone are just fantastic players that will carry Palace in multiple games this season. The question is, how is the rest of the squad going to do? They have lost Wilf Zaha, who personally I don't think has carried them as much in the last couple of seasons as others seem to think. And so I'm not sure it will be as big of a loss as is being heralded on Twitter and everything like that. But it still isn't ideal. He's your main talisman, really, and has come up with some big goals over the years. So how are you going to go about managing without Zaha in the team? Are you going to find a system that really gets the most out of Eze and Elise for a full year? And are you going to be able to keep scoring goals at the rate that you were towards the end of last season? The last bottom half place, I'm going in 11th for Brentford. Now, main reason that I've not got them a little bit higher, Tony. Obviously, as we all know, he is banned for months of the season, and it's just a huge loss. He's one of the best strikers in the league, and to not have him is huge. But it's not as if they've sold him and therefore been able to get a load of money and bring in a replacement. He is fully going to be integrated back into the team as soon as his ban is done. And so you've basically got to stick with it, ready for him to slot back in as soon as possible. So it wouldn't surprise me if at Christmas or New Year, Brentford are lower in the table than my prediction of 11th. And then when Tony comes back, fires in a load of goals, they take that jump up the table. They move away from any chance of relegation and they finish comfortably mid-table. Quick note, I completely forgot. I've got Forest 10th. I just think they'll do okay this season. They looked good at the end of last year. Why not? In 9th place, I've got Brighton. Now, they played some really, really good football under De Zerbi, but we know about this conveyor belt that they seem to have where they lose one player and then another one comes in. But it can't go on forever, right? McAllister is a massive, massive loss for them. But I think the bigger thing is European football is not easy to juggle when you don't have a monstrous squad. And whilst we can all agree that De Zerbi's system works really well, he has a solid starting 11, when you have to dip into your second 11, basically, that's when teams like Brighton don't quite have the finances and players available to be able to swap and change super, super easily. So I think that might just be a little bit too much for them. It would still be a really nice finish, top half of the Premier League, and potentially at least get through to a round or two later than the groups in your European games. I think they'll do okay. Similar vein, in 8th place, I've gone for Aston Villa. Now, a lot of people in their predictions are putting them much higher than this, and I think it's risky because last season you had multiple teams that were basically having a year off, and so Villa took advantage of that. They now have European football to pay attention to as well, and you know with Emery, with his time at Sevilla and everything like that, he loves these competitions. They're going to try and win the Conference League. So it's not going to be second string teams in that competition and hope that they get through. They are going to try and do that. Now, they have made some good signings. Diaby, Tielemans, Pau Torres, for example, really, really solid players. And so they're trying to build a bit more of a squad, similar to what I was saying with Brighton. You need that squad size when you're in these other competitions. So I think they'll do a little bit better than Brighton, but will they go on as crazy a run as they did since Emery joined last season? Ollie Watkins just dominating for months in a row? I don't think so, but 8th is still a solid season for them. Let's move on. In 7th, I'm going for Tottenham. At the time of recording, this is the day where everything has happened with Harry Kane. Bayern have had a bid accepted, and it is now apparently up to Kane as to whether he goes or stays. If Harry Kane stays, with the signing of Maddison and bringing in Ange Postecoglou as manager and the other signings that they're making, I'd potentially bump them up 1 or 2 places here. If they lose Kane, I might even move them further down. So I'm going for a middle ground here where maybe they'll overperform without Kane or underperform with him, and this is where I'm going to slot them in. It's a really, really difficult one. If I was recording this in a week's time, I'd move them in the table. But this is all I can say at this moment in time. 6th, I'm going Newcastle. Not quite as high as last season, but they've made some big signings. Sandro Tonali is huge for them. Livramento, great signing. Harvey Barnes to overtake St. Maximin on that left-hand side. Big signings for Newcastle. Now, they are in the Champions League. They're obviously going to take that very, very seriously. That's going to take a toll on the squad. And I still feel like they're sort of lacking the depth. In pre-season, you have seen people like Elliot Anderson coming through and looking really, really good. But I just think that with the combination of Europe and maybe teams having slightly found them out and how they were playing throughout last season, as well as other teams bouncing back, reinvesting and playing more to their level this season, I think this is where Newcastle would slot in if everyone is playing to their normal ability. In fifth, I'm going Liverpool. I would like to put Liverpool higher. However, their midfield is still a mess at the time of recording. They've got rid of Keita, they've got rid of the Ox, they've got rid of Henderson, Fabinho, Fabio Carvalho. They're all leaving. It's crazy. They've brought in McAllister, they've brought in Szoboszlai. It just doesn't feel like enough. And this was a problem last season. It feels like it's going to continue to be a problem this season. Now, they are linked with Lavia. They're also linked with Caicedo. So if they do make those kind of signings, that would be a bit more solid for them. But I just worry, especially if either McAllister or Szoboszlai get injured, suddenly your already thin midfield gets even thinner. Now, you can argue that you've got Trent coming in from right back in this pivoty role. You got people like Curtis Jones, but it just isn't at the level, it feels like, to really get Liverpool back in the title races and stuff like that. It feels like they're just missing that, I don't know, that spark or something. So it's going to be really interesting to see Gakpo, Núñez, and how they do this season in combination with Salah, Jota, and Luis Diaz. What are we going to see as the standard Liverpool front three? Is it going to be a front four, like a 4-2-3-1 kind of thing? We'll have to wait and see. I'm going with fifth for Liverpool, though. See how they do. Now, this is a risky one. In fourth, I'm going with Chelsea. Now, this is pretty much based on Pochettino getting the most out of these players. Jackson, Mudryk, Madueke, Nkunku. Until recently, he's now out for a couple of months. It was looking really, really good. Enzo and then either, again, Lavio or Caicedo. Liverpool and Chelsea, one of them's going to get one. The other will get the other one. So they obviously have a crazy squad. We all know that. Lampard couldn't get stuff out of them. Graham Potter couldn't really get stuff out of them because they didn't really give him enough time to properly try and implement his stuff, and he was thrown in massively at the deep end. Poch has at least had a summer and a pre-season with everybody to try and make things work going into this season, and in pre-season, they've had some fluid football, they've been looking good. The Nkunku injury is big for them because he was potentially going to be that sort of false nine, second striker, number 10 player that could really, really be key in linking up with Jackson, Mudryk, and the other forwards. But I still think that Poch is a very good manager, and he is going to get a lot more out of this Chelsea side. I'm putting him top four. Third, I'm going Manchester United. Now, it's really tough, isn't it? When you are at this end of the table, you have to try and judge, not only do we think, okay, this team is looking really good, but how are the new signings going to gel with what is already there? Højlund is the big one, isn't it? Man United have been crying out for that striker, and maybe they've finally got their man. David De Gea, whilst he's a good shot stopper, did not fit the Ten Hag playing out from the back, confidence in your goalkeeper, in being that extra man when building from deep. Onana is a huge signing there. So, I think we'll see an improvement from Man U this season. However, I just don't know if it's enough to finish higher on the table. They may get more points than they did last season, but finish in the same kind of position. And I think that's what we'll see, as well as some kind of good cup runs again, like we did last year. And maybe they'll get to a decent round in the Champions League. Second, I'm going Arsenal. It's not too surprising, is it? Now, Arsenal last year were obviously really, really good. They bottled it towards the end of the season. They just couldn't quite handle the pressure. They got a couple of injuries. The Saliba one was a big one. Not in terms exactly of it being the biggest downgrade in world football when he was out of the team, but someone as influential and as good in their position means that the whole system and the patterns of play change. So they have made some big boy signings. Declan Rice is obviously the massive massive one that they've got here. Havertz is really intriguing. I still don't know what to think about that one. I feel like it's a bit bizarre. Jurrien Timber, solid signing. David Raya is coming in as competition for Ramsdale as well. They've done what you should do after doing a season like they did last year. Go big, keep on pushing. Don't say, oh yeah, we finished second. That's fine, the squad was good. Yeah, let's just do it again this year. No, you've got to build, especially when it's Man City. Rice is just a monster signing that could have gone to any of these teams. Could have easily gone to Man City and started week in, week out for them. So it's a game changer for their midfield. I still just don't think that they quite have enough up front. Whilst they have the wide players, you have Ødegaard, Saka, Martinelli, your striker position. Is Havertz going to play there sometimes? Gabby Jesus is starting the season injured. I just feel like if they had that guy, a bit like Man U's problem, suddenly you're looking at a completely different team and just a monstrous forward line that teams will be terrified of. But Nketiah and people like this just don't strike that fear. And so I think they'll just fall short this year. And obviously that means Man City in first place for me. They won the treble. Yes, they've lost some players. Some key players, in fact. Gundogan, Riyad Mahrez. Wow. Just crazy that they're gone. However, they've brought in Kovacic. They are looking at Lucas Paqueta right now. They've brought in Gvardiol, which even more so allows John Stones to have this right back into midfield DM charging forward through the lines and everything like that position that he found himself in last season. They're just so good. It's Pep. You know that they're just going to keep evolving and creating new ideas and systems and patterns of play. I think it's just crazy to write them off. Now, I wouldn't be surprised if they're not top at Christmas or anything like that. Man City notoriously start a little bit slower. But then, when it gets to the back end of the season, juggernaut. You just can't stop them. So I think it'll just be too much for everybody else again. And those are my thoughts this year. Here is the full table, and that is what I think is going to happen for the Premier League. Now we will move on to some of the awards that are going to be given out at the end. Top scorer, Haaland. That's it. Let's move on. Top assister. I like to do outsider shouts for some of these. Kevin De Bruyne, I think, is the obvious one. Maybe Ødegaard. What about someone like Maddison, though? If Kane stays. If he doesn't stay, then what's the point in doing any Spurs predictions? If Kane stays, Maddison top assister. If Kane goes, let's go Ødegaard. Golden Glove, I think Man City are going to be a bit better at the back this season, and I think Gvardiol is a big reason why that's going to be the case, and they're going to focus more on trying to shut teams out, as well as obviously scoring the crazy goals that they do. But their defence let them down at points last season, and was a reason why Arsenal were able to get away from them. So I'm going to go Golden Glove this year, Ederson. Signing of the season. Now, I don't want to be boring, and so I like to go out on a limb on these ones each year. Instead of saying someone like Rice, let's go for someone that I think is going to change a team, and especially how they attack a lot of the time. I'm going to go Jackson for Chelsea. I think I would have gone Nkunku, but that injury may keep him out for 4 months. I'm going for Jackson because Chelsea have lacked, a bit like Arsenal, Man U over the last few years, they've not had that guy. And so I think this is the one. Jackson for Chelsea, signing of the season, bang. Flop of the season. Now, this is the kind of thing that gets clipped, doesn't it? I think one of the easy shouts would be someone like Havertz. So I'm going to throw a wild one out there. Incredibly highly rated, younger player, coming on big money, but from a totally different league. At risk of sounding stupid, let's throw Tonali into the ring. Imagine it's the shout of the season, though. I'd sound like a genius. So there we go. There are all of my predictions for the Premier League this year. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. If you enjoyed it, thumb it up. We will come back to these at the end of the season. So subscribe for more content, and I'll see you guys next time. In a bit.